but it won't have the details around, maybe some of the offices downstairs don't have that detail going on. But it would be the exact same as the city.
We're good. We're ready. Good morning. It's September 28th. It is the Franklin County Commissioners Board meeting. We have Commissioner Mullen, myself, Keith Johnson, Karen Milham, clerk of the board. I call the meeting to order, and if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first order of business is to approve the minutes from August 24th, 2021. Is there any additions, corrections? Commissioner Mullen?
No, I have none.
I would just like to bring everybody's attention to what our Representative Clippard said in this meeting. Gave an update of the COVID-19 data from Governor Inslee's website. 0.085% of Washington's population have died from COVID-19. 99.015 have not died of COVID-19. Of those who tested positive for COVID-19, 98.81 have not passed away. I just wanted to emphasize that from that meeting. That was from one of our representatives reading off of our governor's website. But with that, the minutes are approved. Commissioner Administrator updates. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spent actually most of my time since we last met on a variety of redistricting issues. We will have a resolution presented here shortly to discuss a little bit more detail. The redistricting committee had its first organizational meeting last night. We only had 3 members of the committee there, but we were able to kind of get a better understanding of what the mission and scope of the committee is, and begin to start looking at some of the legal requirements of what's going to be required of us. And we've got another meeting scheduled next Thursday. Last evening, we were briefed by Sean Sant on kind of the current state of litigation as it impacts the redistricting committee, and took a look at the existing Franklin County district maps as a starting point of where we want to go. We did not discuss any proposals for new maps or new districts. That will come after we've had a series of public meetings. We've got public meetings scheduled in here in Pasco at the Happel Center. We've reserved some space at the high school in Connell and the elementary school in Mesa for some public hearings in those locations as well. We are engaging a Spanish interpreter so that those meetings can be conducted in both English and Spanish. I have some translation devices for those that would want to use them in those discussions and presentations where the committee can hear from the public what the public would like to see in redistricting plans. So we're moving forward. Obviously, there's a number of different issues that are still to be decided or to be examined with respect to litigation and so forth. I know we're going to be talking about some of that in executive session today, but I just want to give you a brief update of where we are in that committee.
Thank you, Keith. Commissioner Mullen?
Last week met with the Health Benefits Committee. Short news on that is we had twice as many claims and 3 times the amount in payouts. So obviously there's going to be an increase in the benefits package. For every dollar that Franklin County is spending, the insurance company paid out $1.69, if I'm correct. So that's quite a jump from over last year. So I guess be prepared, and there's other things we can do to try to keep those benefits low, and that's using mail order prescriptions and using preferred providers. So That was about I also met with some citizens here about creating a mental health solution. So that's about it for last week.
Okay, I received phone calls from employees at the Walla Walla State Penitentiary, from the Connell prison. All of them were concerned about the mandate for the vaccination, and they're going to walk away from their jobs. I also got a call from a man that works for a business in here with over 100 employees. He's already given his notice. He's leaving. We have a mass exodus of people because of this mandate for this vaccination from employment, and it's creating a shortage in our health care industry. I also had the EWOC meeting, Eastern Washington Council of Governments, and there we had a lady present about the WSU extension, Bridget Romner. And it seems that WSU has adopted a dress code now for 4-H participants. And the acceptance, not just the acceptance, but I'm trying to get clarity on exactly what it is about transgender. And now we've got 4-H people leaving 4-H, creating their own individual groups. We're getting all this pushed down our throat here of acceptance when we're not accepting them. They're more than welcome to come in, but they're coming in and they're forcing their hand, and it's creating a lot of people that basically don't want their children introduced to that. And so they're leaving. And so I think WSU is going to probably be seeing a mass exodus of 4-H participants. And I think that's about, no, there's one more here that I got an email here this morning. Dear Franklin County Commissioners, what do you know about this? Why are hospitals and schools making money off the pandemic? COVID appears to be profitable for some. How much corruption needs to be exposed before you politicians do something? You are not responsible for the schools specifically, but you all need to realize that we have a systematic corruption issue in every crack and crevice in our community. Are you part of the solution or part of the problem? And then she sent me this printout, Tri-City School District's COVID funding. Richland, $21,270,000. Pasco, $57,261,000. Kennewick, $58,666,000. And she raises a valid point. The schools are profiting from this. The hospitals are profiting from this. We've heard the cases on that. So I think that there is a valid argument that she brings forward here. And that's basically all I have for the updates. Next, we have the resolution relating to the creation and requirements of the redistricting committee. Keith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we have done here is tried to put into a resolution form the intent of the board with respect to the redistricting commission. When the committee, or refer to it as a committee as opposed to commission. That gets confusing when I talk about commissioners, so I'll say committee members. When it was first adopted back in May, it was done by floor motion and not a formal resolution. So we're bringing a resolution forward now to formalize that decision, to give direction to what are the real objectives of the redistricting committee. The reason that there are two options to choose from is the first one adopts what we think the board said in the floor motion. Option two is what we think the board probably intended. The biggest distinction between the two is that there are two members of this committee that were appointed, one from the county's Information Services Division and one from the county auditor's elections division. We don't think, when I say we, I don't think that it was intended for those two individuals to be voting members of the committee, but that they were to provide technical support in the way of mapping GIS information and precinct level data from the elections department, so that we're consistent with state law, but also not expecting the voting members to have a deep understanding of how GIS graphic information systems work, or how the elections, the internal mechanism of the elections take place.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, if I may,
Sure.
let's just ask that question to Commissioner Mullen right now. Did you intend for them to be voting members from IS? And
I think they should be voting members. But,
the auditor's office and IS.
I guess I'd want some discussion on that to determine why it would not be a good idea.
Well, since they are responsible for executing whatever plan that this board adopts, I did not think that it was prudent for them to have an influence over the creation of the geographic boundaries of these districts and select voters in each of those districts. My understanding of the intent of the committee to begin with was to provide a more objective, less political input to the process of creating new commissioner districts. By having internal staff be voting members, it's really no different than if I drafted the maps or if I had a staff member draft those maps for approval. So the intent was to try to insulate a little bit further the staff from the political decision or the policy decision that this board has to make. And that's why my recommendation is to not make them voting members of the committee. Mr. Sant, do you have anything you could provide in the way of response to that question?
I think he captured it, and I was going to frankly make the recommendation that perhaps the chairman or another member of the commissioners board be a participant at those meetings to make sure that any discussions that come up questioning what the intent of the board is, because I don't want to be the one speaking to what this board wants from this committee. I was solely attended last night for the purpose of giving the legal guidance. There was some additional requests. I think that would be helpful for the additional members to provide just those parameters that we've talked about, which is trying to keep the areas contiguous. In other words, you can't have divisions. You can't have like part of District 2 up in Connell area and then the other part of District 2 down here with another commission district in between, things like that, just giving them the legal framework. But I think it would be important for not to be a voting member, but simply to be present there for those committee meetings. So that way the person that is assigned, just like any other committee that the members of this board participate on, that way that person would be then reporting back to the board as far as the discussions. They wouldn't be a voting member, because the way I understood it, just like Mr. Johnson laid out, was that the idea was to have this committee kind of run with it and take over. We're still working with Peter Morrison, that's our demographer, to come up with some proposals. These are just simply proposals that are what we feel are legally able to be defensible as far as achieving the demographic data and giving some options. So that was discussed with the board last night, that they will have full authority to make recommendations. We explained to them that the expectation is that they will come up with top three maps, and they would consider maps from either citizen input. If citizens wanted to come in there and provide the maps, the committee ultimately would review that as well. Also, the legally mandated responsibility would be for the committee to also consider any proposals that were presented by the plaintiffs on the current litigation. And I think that's what caught a lot of people's attention, is because they saw a map in the paper, and they thought that was somehow being recommended by the county or even adopted. That was simply the plaintiff's proposal or one of them. I assume the plaintiffs will have a couple options to request input, and that was consistent with what they had outlined early on in the case, is wanting to proceed forward once we got to that point to get public input. So anyway, I would just make that recommendation. I think it'd be helpful to have a member of the board in attendance with those redistricting committee meetings. That way, if there's any questions that arise as to intent of the board, that member could help answer that question and then report back to the board, just like on any other committee assignment, like your weekly reports could provide the other commissioners with the process there. So anyway, that's my only.
Mr. Sand, I'd just like to disagree, because if I sit in on the meeting, I could be accused of influencing, and I don't want to do that. I want them to pick this, get the input from the public under Keith's guidance. He can direct them. If you put any commissioner in that room, we could be accused of influencing that board on their drawing of the maps, and I don't want to be accused of that.
Well, I believe the way the makeup of the districting was set up is each of the commissioners were able to appoint their own member to be on the board. So, I mean, there's influence that's going to be around, and this is not a quasi judicial matter. It affects the rights of the entirety of the county. And so we recognize you're going to get comments, as this board has received comments from individuals weighing in on what they would like to see with that. Ultimately, it's going to have to come back for the board's decision. So regardless of what input is coming back, that's the question. So anyway, I'm just saying I don't feel comfortable either for that same reason. I don't feel comfortable being present, other than if legal questions arise, I will ask then, I guess, for Mr. Johnson or for the chair. One of the issues that we've outlined with the proposal here for the resolution would be that the committee gets to choose a chairperson within that committee. So once that person is assigned, then I could communicate any kind of legal questions that come from that committee. They could send those to our office, and we could do our best to answer those specific questions. But I don't want to be participating, because I have explained to them yesterday that the intent was that the committee is free to engage with members of the public. They're free to engage with their individual groups. Like if you have the cattlemen's there, you have the Farm Bureau, they're expected to reach out to their members and be able to garner any input from those individual members, as well as from the general public that might come to one of these three scheduled public meeting sites. So anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there that it might be helpful. That way, if there is a question about intent, just because of this, it would speed along the process. What would usually happen then is Keith would then come back to the board a week later and ask for any further direction. So anyway, I was just suggesting that it might be a way to help speed that process along. But anyway, that's kind of how it went. And we recognize, because of the number of members on that committee, it's going to be a challenge sometimes to get everybody to have availability. We do have WebEx, so people can attend remote if possible, but there are some other conflicts with other meetings in the community as well. So we're trying to work through those so that everybody could weigh in, participate. We also discussed having them be able to exchange ideas or discussions amongst themselves through email. So that way there's an opportunity for them to review materials if necessary before the scheduled meeting time. So anyway, that's where it is. Anything else, Mr. Johnson?
No, I just would add the kind of the second piece, and Sean alluded to this. There's 8 essential steps or requirements that this board would be placing on the committee. Those 8 requirements are the same under both options of resolutions to choose from. The only thing that really is different is whether those 2 positions are voting members or not.
I was under the impression that they were not going to be voting members,
That's
just
why
there
we need
for
to clear
guidance.
it up. That's exactly why we want
And we need to clear that up before we move on. But the other thing, shouldn't the Board of Commissioners be voting on this group? And shouldn't there be a little bit of looking into their activities? Because I don't even know the group of names other than the one that I appointed, which was Brett Ochoa. That's who I appointed. Who is the Tri-City Hispanic Chamber of
The
Commerce?
Hispanic Chamber is the one organization that has not named a.
They haven't named one.
Right.
What about the Pasco Chamber of Commerce?
Mike Gonzalez has been nominated. Mike Gonzalez was with Franklin PUD, but he's now with the City of Pasco.
So Mike Gonzalez is a PCO for Franklin County Republican Party. I think that's a conflict. We can't be putting anybody on the board that is affiliated with the party and it therefore can influence. Okay, so then we got Farm Bureau.
James Alford has been,
He isn't participating in any political activity that I know of. Cattlemen's Association.
Cindy Hayes.
Yep, none there. Commissioner Mullen, your pick was,
Rupi Cardenas.
and I believe Loopy doesn't participate in any political activity.
I have not done any independent research of the background or political affiliation of any of these individuals.
And who is Commissioner Pex?
Felix Vargas.
Okay, Felix Vargas came to our PCO meeting. He is the campaign manager for a candidate for the Pasco City Council. I believe he's also been active in some commissioner races, so I don't know if there'd be a conflict there. I don't think we can have people who are affiliated with elections as far as candidates that are running or aiding in other candidates that are running for office, Democrat or Republican. I think this should be a neutral, as best as we can put together, a neutral body. So I think before we approve.
I understand your reasoning, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, but I think we need to be pretty careful about eliminating people based on what are essentially protected free speech kinds of issues. I understand the need to be objective and not partisan, but if you drive that too far, you end up only being able to select people who are politically inactive. And
Okay, so
that has a flip side consequence to it, is all I'm saying.
RCW 36.32.053 addresses this, and we gotta consider it. It's part of the process of this board or this committee, excuse me, part of the committee that we're putting together. So we got to make sure that we don't have, or it can be washed.
Well, I guess the only concern is now, this was raised, the commission, this board passed an oral resolution appointing the members without any other caveat, and there's been no other discussion as to any kind of criteria. So this is the two options consistent with that discussion back from May. We could not take prior action because of the current legal status of the litigation. And so I guess the question becomes now, if the board wants to add additional criteria or factors where there's going to be additional scrutiny, I don't know that we'd have, and I don't know the makeup of the members. Certainly we could put whatever criteria the board wants to add for the resolution, and that might require them to go and find other participants at this point. I think everybody,
Sean,
one of the discussions the board could do or ask of the committee is simply to state any involvement that they have with political activities. They could, because I'd be really cautious to ask, well, how did you vote in the last primary? How did you vote?
No, we don't. No, we're not asking.
I get that. And I think it
But under this first option, we're quoting, whereas RCW 36.32.020 and RCW 29A.92.050. We are quoting RCWs and we must follow them. This RCW specifically speaks to this about participation. And so if we're not cognizant of that, we could be blowing this thing up before it ever gets going.
And consistent with the RCWs, each of the members could state any kind of conflicts that would be inconsistent with the criteria laid out by the statute.
Okay. I think, Keith, I think we better bring this up at the next board meeting. I don't think we can make a decision on this today until we do some further looking into these RCWs and seeing how it could affect this committee of people. And it would be nice to have a third commissioner here for his input.
Yeah, we can certainly accommodate that. I just would ask for leave from the board to continue to meet as if we are moving forward.
So the next meeting is this Thursday?
No,
or next
a
Thursday?
week from this Thursday.
So we could have another,
We'll
our
have
next
another board
commissioner
meeting
meeting
before
yes.
that. group meets again.
And since we are on that topic, just to further provide some clarification on the particular question about having staff members participate as voting members, I think as Mr. Johnson identified, that also places it's kind of like asking a subordinate to weigh in on who is their employer or their boss. And so that was one of the questions raised, is that because this is going to have broad political implications for one group or another, having staff members be put in that position, especially if it comes down to a close tie or a vote on things, that really puts a lot of undue burden that I don't think is fair or appropriate upon staff members that are subordinates. It would be one thing to put that under direct appointees of the commission, but I think for other staff members of various departments, especially departments that are run by their own independent electeds, that kind of puts a little bit of undue influence upon them. So that, I think that's why it came back. But if that issue wants to be raised next week when we have the full board to weigh in, that's something to maybe consider.
Does the commission have the ability to meet in public? I mean, amongst themselves, or is it strictly WebEx?
Our public meetings will be where the public can come in person to those meetings.
But what about the meetings with the redistricting committee? Do they have that option to meet in person? Because I think
Both.
it's very important that they do.
Yeah, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question. We did meet in person last night. We had a couple of them that were out of town that joined
Called
by
in by
WebEx.
WebEx?
But if they were here and available, they could come in person.
They were?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank
the
you.
ones on WebEx was still a total of only 3?
Yes, there were 2 on WebEx and 1 individual in person.
Was
And a staff member.
All the staff was there, but yeah.
there was 1 staff member too? IS?
GIS, yes.
Yeah, so we had 4 members of the 9,
Yeah,
which is still not a quorum.
correct. Yeah,
What do they have to have for a quorum, Keith?
typically that's a majority,
Yeah,
5. We did not have any debate or discussion, or we weren't moving toward a decision point. There's a couple pieces that maybe that it's for your benefit or the benefit of the public, that just like having a staff meeting, if I were meeting with the IS director, those would not necessarily be open to the public. But in terms of where we are discussing the actual maps and plans for redistricting, those would be public meetings in which we would allow the public to attend.
And I don't have any problem attending these meetings. I would sit into them. I wouldn't make comment or influence at all. I would listen. And if I was asked, I would give an answer.
At a public meeting, you're always welcome, and just like anyone else, as long
Okay.
as you're not discussing county business as a quorum of
Right.
commissioners, that's,
More than 1 commissioner could attend?
I don't see
No.
what.
Just
More than one then would trigger the Open Meetings
OMPA,
Act and
yeah.
everything else.
But these are going to be public meetings.
Yeah, the public meetings, yeah. So one could participate
Yeah.
watching on, but you got to be cautious not to be making a comment or anything else where it's going to have influence. But I think that happens on occasion where you have 2 participating members, like I think Board of Health is one of those where we've had, or the some other committees where there's 2 of the members of the commission that are actually on that.
So would it be a violation of the OMPA if I attended in person and the other commissioners were on the WebEx? Would that?
I think that raises questions if
Okay.
everybody's on it, and I guess that could be something for discussion. Is we just
But
may
Sean-
make it an open meeting.
If we have provided notice for those meetings, that they're public meetings.
Yeah.
Then the commissioners can attend.
Yeah. If we do that, that's the only
Which is what-
requirement. There's nothing wrong with having commissioners be on there or participate. We just have to make sure that the notice is such that, hey, this is a public meeting. If the board chooses to have each and every meeting with the board, even if it's for ministerial things and gathering, that's the easiest fix for it. We just make it all a public meeting. That just does change the notice requirement. And it gives each of the board members an opportunity. But again, I guess it goes back, Mr. Chairman, of what the board wants. If the board wants to avoid the appearance, even slight, of having influence, that's why, the suggestion of having one person there to be present. But again, you're right, it could raise an issue. If questions were asked directly, then, does that put you in a bad position too? Just like it would, anybody else that's there trying to answer questions. So I would just defer to the board. If the easiest solution is just to make every single one of these a public meeting so that all three commissioners can equally be present, then it would be on all of you to, I guess, avoid any situation where it looks like the board's trying to do undue influence upon the committee and take anything away from them.
I just wish we would have started this discussion a couple months ago so we could have this all worked out. I wish that we would have had this already all laid out and known these RCWs and the restrictions there that would lie within. It just is something that now we're scrambling. So I think it's important that we wait till next week, try to decipher with the people that are on right now, if there is a conflict, if we need to find somebody else.
With respect to the public meetings, you okay? With respect to public meetings, we have posted notice of those in the Franklin County Gazette to
Franklin County Graphic.
the Graphic. Thank you. Confusing with my mother's hometown newspaper. Sorry about that. The Graphic to meet our legal requirements, but also we're posting it in the Tri-City Herald to get more awareness on both Spanish and English radio, a number of different ways of announcing, and on our website, a number of different ways of announcing these public meetings beyond just the minimum legal requirement. And they are being noticed as public meetings.
All right. Thank you. I think that we've covered as much on this topic as we can today. Until next week, we'll bring it up again. So that takes us down to public comment. Is there anybody on the phone?
I do not have any callers on the phone as of yet.
Anybody in the audience with public comment?
So I appreciate Commissioner Didier pointing out RCW 36.32.053. On this, where it's talking about redistricting committees for counties, it does talk about that there should be 5. So if anyone needs to be removed, they can be, but it says 5. And it doesn't say exactly how the makeup needs to be. But it does definitely state here that members, no person may serve on a redistricting committee that is within 2 years before appointment was an elected official or elected legislative, county, or state party officer. And Mike Gonzalez is a county party officer. So I know he was appointed by PUD, but they need a different choice because that is, the law says it plain and simple. I think there is questions about Mr. Vargas because it does also say no one can participate if they actively participate or contribute to the political campaign of any candidate. Now, it does claim it's for county officers, county elective office, but I don't know what else he's done. I don't know what the Democrat Party does. I don't focus on them. So, but it's just something that we should be aware of, that we need to make sure that there's no appearance of conflict. I think that's vital. And then in section 6 of this law, it says the legislative body of the county, which is you, will provide adequate funding and resources to support the duties of the redistricting committee. So anything that they request. So they choose someone to be a chair. The chair is non-voting. The rest of the others are voting members. And then the rest of the professionals, either in the county, would include the PA, the GIS person. They are what they are, the sources that you provide to them to be making the decisions. I don't know that they necessarily need to be public if it's so complex that you have to give 2 weeks notice before any meeting, but certainly they should be meeting in person because they need to be reading and studying the laws, debating with each other, looking at the maps, and that's just my opinion, but thank you.
So Keith, if that's the case, if the chair can vote, then we take it to an even number. It could be 3-3.
I would certainly need to review that. I was not aware that
I
the
wouldn't
chairman
either.
had to be a non-voting member, but I'll certainly take a look at that.
Okay, thank
Is he
you.
a non-voting member or is he the deciding factor in case of a tie?
The way she read it was a non-voting member.
Anyway.
But Keith, if you could look into
Yeah,
that for
absolutely.
clarity. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move down to the office business vouchers. I believe we have one today.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $353,246.27 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
I will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, I think we're down to the consent agenda, 2 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 2.
I second with no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Keith, we're down to administration office business.
Yeah, I don't have anything else other than a request for some executive sessions.
Okay? And we're down to public comment. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, Keith, if you'll lead us into executive session.
Thank you. It's the first item, we're requesting an executive session for up to 20 minutes. I'm looking for approval here. About 20 minutes would be fine. Under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, discuss with legal counsel matters regarding to litigation, potential litigation. Asked that the board, myself, the administrator, the clerk, the prosecuting attorney, the HR director, be allowed to participate.
And Matt?
Oh, yes, and our Public Works Director, Matt Mahoney.
Jen's the one I've been working on.
All right, so we'll request that Jen Johnson, our Chief Civil Deputy, be,
And just for clarification, the next executive council will be with the special deputy counsel from Benton County to meet. with the
Correct.
board. So I'm not going to be participating with that, so
All right.
I'll let Jen take over this one, and then I'll be available in
Okay.
my office.
will she be participating in that next executive session?
No, she'll be participating in
Just
this
this
one.
first one?
Just this
Okay.
one, and then Benton County Special Deputy will appear and present for that one.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be in my office, so if something comes up, then I'm needed.
Those of you that are on the phone, I'm going to hang up and restart a meeting.
We're going to go into another executive session with the council from. All right, we have come out of executive session and we're back into regular session. So Keith, if you'll take us in with the next executive session.
Yes, I would request a executive session up to 60 minutes with the possibility of coming out earlier under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, discuss with legal counsel, litigation, or potential litigation. Would ask that the members of the board, myself, the clerk, and Ryan Brown and Ryan Lex from the prosecuting attorney's office in Benton County, who's representing the county on a litigation matter, be allowed to participate.
I couldn't hear.
My mic's
The
working.
mics are
I guess
off.
I got to talk right into it. Seems to not be working unless I.
You just call for an executive session. So,
I'll speak
Well,
up.
this is another executive?
Yes.
Yes.
Open the doors. Oh.
Yeah, we had to go back into public session and claim the next one. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how to open the door.
Just push that little.
Leo, you're ready.
Yeah, you're safe to come in. We're out of executive session.
It's
Oh,
10:29, we are out of executive session, no actions been taken by the board.
We have come out of executive session and we're back in regular session, and I believe we have a motion for a action.
I move that legal counsel is requested to file the legal memorandum in front of us with the court in support of the motion to vacate that was filed by Mr. Sant on September 23rd, 2021.
I second. There's been a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I believe we have no other executive sessions. Keith, is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. What's that?